May put down her cup of hot chocolate and stood up to open the door. She walked a little slower than usual. Age was gradually becoming a problem for her. She tried to quicken her pace as she headed for the front door, feeling that the more she moved, the better she felt. As with many other aspects of her life lately, she was simply pretending that everything was fine. Recent events had complicated matters. She had a lot on her mind, but today she had to put those concerns aside and give her full attention to someone who needed her. Through the frosted glass of the door, she saw two figures. She opened the door and smiled warmly, as a good hostess should. "Hello," she said, genuinely pleased to see her guests. It was cold in Buffalo Grove, the town in the northern suburbs of Chicago where she lived, so cold that you could see your breath. Her house was in a suburban neighborhood not far from the main street, close enough to walk to the small tourist attractions in the form of vintage buildings. But she never did. She had lived there for almost 7 years, becoming an integral part of the town after moving there following trouble in Champaign and Urbana in southern Illinois. Two women at the door greeted her, gasping for air in the cold and clearly wanting to get inside quickly. "Come in, come in. It's cold outside. Winter came early this year," she said, stepping aside and letting her guests into the warm house. Both women entered the house, knowing their way around. They had been here many times before. In the large room with arched ceilings lined with large pine beams, a fireplace was burning. Around the fireplace, which was semicircular with a canopy, stood two soft armchairs and a sofa similar to those found around round fireplaces in ski lodges. Family photographs hung on the walls. Knickknacks reminiscent of a life well lived stood on the shelves. A television hung above the fireplace, and in the corner in front of tightly closed French windows stood a grand piano, gleaming with white enamel, on whose lacquer photographs were neatly arranged. On one wall hung an antique clock that showed the time accurately. Both guests took off their coats and scarves and neatly folded them on a coat rack placed by the door for such occasions. "Hi, May. How are you? Aren't you cold?" asked the first, a tall brunette. She was a regular at the gym and worked out a lot. May rolled her eyes. "Why does everyone say that as soon as it gets cold?" she asked with a slight southern accent. "Everyone always asks, 'Aren't you cold?' And it's so annoying." "Yes, it's cold. We can all feel it." May tried to imitate a Chicago accent, and both women smiled at each other. May was in a good mood again. "I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it, May. It's just a greeting," said the second woman, Rhonda Ranta, with feigned solemnity. Rhonda was also tall, but slightly shorter than Gina, about 5 feet 8 inches, but she made up for it with the high heels she always wore. Rhonda had short blonde hair, clear pale skin, and was the epitome of Scandinavian beauty. Although she had lived in the United States for over 13 years, she had a very noticeable accent and sometimes left words out of sentences when she was nervous or in a hurry. Today, she was dressed for the weather. Tight-fitting tights, leather boots with 3-inch heels, and a long knitted dress with a scarf attached to the neck with Velcro. Gina was perfectly made up, just the right amount of foundation, blush, and eye makeup, while Rhonda wore no makeup at all, and they both looked good. Gina looked around and asked May, "So she's not here yet?" May moved closer to a soft chair by the door, shook her head, and sat down. "No, not yet. I told her she'd be here after 4, so she should be here soon." She pointed to the tea and coffee on the coffee table and said, "Ladies, help yourselves." Rhonda sighed and said, "So we're going to do this again? Reopen old wounds?" "That's exactly what we're going to do," Gina replied sharply. "You know it's good for our souls, and those who come to us need to know that we're just like them. Good or bad, they need to feel comfortable. That's the only way they'll open up and we can give them the support they need. Besides, telling stories is cathartic. Every time I do it, I discover something new about myself. I explore it a little deeper. I probe that loose tooth with my tongue again, and one day, if I'm lucky, it will fall out." Rhonda looked at Gina again and sighed. I know. It's just that sometimes I feel like I don't want to. It makes me feel even worse. I have to relive everything all over again. It makes it almost impossible to move on, you know?" "Well, Rhonda, no one is forcing you to come back. I would say that when you are ready to move on, you probably won't need us anymore. The fact that you are still here." May held out one hand, the other holding a steaming cup of hot chocolate. Rhonda smiled weakly, shrugged, and began pouring herself a cup of coffee. An awkward silence fell for a moment as May stared into her cup while Gina and Rhonda poured themselves coffee. Gina caught Rhonda's gaze and looked at her, slightly embarrassed. They settled down on the sofa, each took a sip, and then Gina asked, "Did anyone watch The Good Wife last night?" Rhonda frowned. "God, we must be desperate to talk about that nonsense." "Good coffee, May," she said, nodding to May. May smiled faintly in response but remained lost in her thoughts. "But it can't be worse than that awful stuff Diana used to make, right? Remember?" Rhonda said, gesturing as if she were nauseous. Rhonda giggled. "Yeah, that was awful, wasn't it?" The doorbell rang and all three looked eagerly in that direction. "Well," said May, setting down her cup of hot chocolate, "I suppose I'd better be a gracious hostess." She went to open the door, leaving Gina and Rhonda behind. "I wish Dina were here," Gina said wistfully. "Well, she has her own life, Rhonda. She moved away. We still see her from time to time, but she doesn't need us anymore. Trey made sure of that." "And Ryan," Rhonda muttered to herself. She was still a little annoyed that all their plans and intrigues had not led to the desired result. See, after the game, Ed. At that moment, May burst into the room, leading a young woman no older than 30. She was dyed blonde, with dark roots showing at her hairline. She had fair skin with a slight redness around her eyes and nose, suggesting that she had been out in the cold for too long, or cried too much, or both. She was wearing a light summer coat over a knee-length wool dress and was clearly freezing. "And these are the girls. This is Rhonda, and this is Gina," said May, leading the new girl into the room. "You're frozen, dear. Gina, please bring Brooklyn some coffee. She needs to warm up." "Brooklyn, right? Do you prefer Brooklyn?" Brooklyn looked around, assessing the room and trying not to attract the attention of the other two women. "What? Oh yes, Brooklyn, Brooklyn, Bree. Whatever. I'll answer to anything. Just not, hey, whore. I've had enough of that from Josh. Sit in front of the fireplace, dear. Sugar? Milk?" Brooklyn sank into an armchair at right angles to the sofa and looked gratefully at Gina, who handed her coffee from a porcelain teapot on the coffee table. "No, please, Black." "How do you like men?" asked Rhonda, trying to smooth things over, but immediately realizing that it was the worst question she could have asked. "Don't mind her, dear. She thinks she's funny. We don't have the heart to tell her she's not," May replied calmly, noticing the disappointed look on Brooklyn's face. "I'm sorry," said Rhonda. "I'm not myself, I'm nervous. New person. You know how it is." Brooklyn paused for a moment and they could see the struggle inside her. In the end, the struggle won, and she simply said, "It's okay," in a voice that said, "Maybe it's okay, but don't do that again or you'll get your ass kicked." Fine, as all men know, is code for women. It really means, "That's not fine at all, but I'll go along with it and I won't do it again." It makes men cringe. It was obvious to the short woman that Brooklyn wasn't going to put up with any nonsense. "So, Brooke, we have a standard way of breaking the ice. I know you're hurting. We've all been there and we understand. We know you need support, otherwise you wouldn't have come to us. Don't be afraid to talk a lot at this meeting. We're here to open up to you, not the other way around. We want you to know that you're safe here, and the only way to do that is to tell you our stories. So, you know you're among friends." Brooklyn looked at Gina and smiled uncertainly. That sounds nice, I guess, but I don't want to. I'm completely exhausted right now. I've done so much and I just don't know what to do. He hardly talks to me. It's mostly his shark lawyer. We never got along. He's a jerk." Gina sat down on the edge of the couch, reached out, and put her hand on Brooklyn's shoulder. "Everything will be okay. We've been in the same situation. Things will work out. Slowly but surely. I think it's important to note one more thing, dear. We are not a group that destroys people. We are not a bunch of bitter women who think all men are bad. As I said on the phone, we are here to support each other and try to get our lives back on track. We've all made mistakes and we're not hiding that. This isn't a place to make excuses for our actions. If that's what you need, you're better off leaving. We acknowledge our mistakes and try to accept them, or as they say now, own them, and move on, rather than shifting all the blame onto others." May chimed in. "Yes," said Rhonda, nodding in response to May's comment. "Yes, we have to admit our guilt. There may have been mitigating circumstances, but those need to be dealt with individually. We all messed up, and a part of the job of this little group is to accept that and help each other move on. It's like a 12-step program, only without all the annoying steps. No higher power is making me do this, that's for sure." So, I just don't know what to do right now. I'm on trial. I live in this shitty one-room apartment. I've seen my kids 4 times since then, and the only lawyer I can afford is disgusting. Josh says he'll be nice to me in the divorce. But I don't want a divorce, and he won't even talk to me seriously. We talk, but it doesn't turn into an argument right away. Brooklyn was choking up at the end of her story, getting more and more upset. It's okay. Don't worry, Brooke. We're here to help you. We're not going to help you get revenge or try to ruin your husband financially, but you're not alone. We've been through the same thing you're going through, and we'll be there for you. Why? Brooklyn snorted, shifting her gaze from one woman to another, her face a mixture of genuine curiosity and self-pity. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. What I'm still doing. The last sentence sounded like a cry for help. Rhonda and Gina exchanged glances, slightly concerned. It wasn't easy to explain why they had done this. It was painful for every woman present. Well, maybe you can explain to us why you're here. No need to go into details, Rhonda began. No, it's okay. I can do this. I can talk about it. I need to talk about it. No one in my family wants to hear it. And God knows Josh doesn't. Are you sure, dear? May asked gently, standing up and leaning forward. We really don't want to put you in an awkward position. No, it's okay. It'll be hard, but I think I need to do this. To explain, Brooklyn said, giving May a small but grateful smile. Well, you're the best, Brooklyn. Come by any time, May said, holding out her hand and gesturing toward the entire room. Okay, I'm Brooklyn. Brooklyn Stone. Or rather, I was. I think I'll be Brooklyn Hall again soon. Oh. Brooklyn paused for a few seconds, thinking about her words. Neither woman said a word, giving her time to calm down. An old clock ticked loudly in the background. Brooklyn looked up, suddenly realizing she had stopped talking. Anyway, am, for now, I guess, married to Josh Stone. I'm 32. I know I look younger. I've always looked this young. Josh is 35. I'm a local, born and raised in Orland Park, south of here. Josh is also from Chicago. He's Irish, from an old family. Big family, brothers and sisters. You know how it is. One brother is a cop, 2 are firefighters, Josh is a financial advisor. He's not in sales, he used to be, but the stress was too much. Now he's a strategic consultant. He advises companies on sales strategies and things like that. In his spare time, he works with a small group of software developers on creating some kind of auto trader for the iPhone or something like that. I'm not really sure. Brooklyn shook her head, as if disappointed that she couldn't remember something. Anyway, I'm a paralegal. I work at a law firm downtown. I wanted to be a lawyer, but the cost of the exam, plus the hours. Well, I didn't want to sacrifice my life, you know? We've been married for 8 years. We have 2 children, Tara and Adrian. They're wonderful kids. I know everyone says that, but mine, well, they really are. Brooklyn smiled to herself, then opened the Photos app on her phone and found the kids folder. Here, look, she said, handing the phone to Gina. Gina couldn't help but notice that Brooklyn's hands were shaking. Gina looked, leaned over to Rhonda, and said the words that are usually said in situations like this. Then she passed the phone to Rhonda, who passed it to May, who did the same. Well? Gina asked, slowly returning the phone to Brooke. Oh, yes, Brooklyn said. Well, it was good, you know? A good marriage. Josh was wonderful. We met at a church party. I mean, neither of us was particularly religious. I was just serving brownies with my sister. She's a baker. And he was there as part of the Big Brothers Big Sisters of America program. I mean, it's Josh, the big Boy Scout and savior of the world. Well, at least the lost world. It was one of those things they call love at first sight, you know, Brooklyn said nostalgically, looking back. Gina smiled at Rhonda. They both knew exactly what she was talking about. We just talked for hours, and we had each other's phone numbers. He insisted that I take a picture of him on my phone and attach it to the number he added. Then he insisted that I do the same. Anyway, you know how it goes. Dates, movies, flowers, dinners, hot nights, romance, everything you could possibly want. If there was a romantic gesture to be made, he made it. When he proposed, he even had his dog deliver the ring to me. My family absolutely adored him. And I think he liked me. Well, he liked me at least. Too much. The last 2 words were said in a whisper. Gina and Rhonda looked at each other again. and Gina risked a quick glance at May, who was watching Brooklyn intently. They were clearly getting to the heart of the matter, and you didn't have to be a surgeon to see where this was going. We had years when everything was just wonderful. Josh was attentive, good in bed, no complaints. I've had a lot of men. I know what's good and what's not, and he never complained about me. We have wonderful children. We don't fight very often. We have a beautiful house in Schaumburg, far enough away from our relatives that they're not hanging around our doorstep, you know? But close enough that we can visit them when we want to. Everything was Everything was perfect. Which makes what I did even more stupid. I had an affair with his brother Michael. For 3 months, I don't even know how it started. We were at a barbecue, had a couple of beers, and started flirting stupidly. We were all flirting a little. Not a lot, just a little. That's what his whole family does, and I just responded in kind. You have to stand up for yourself, you know? It just happened. I still don't know how it happened. I wasn't too drunk to know what I was doing. I was just out of it, you know? I look back and I can't understand what I was thinking, what I was feeling. It just happened, the flirting got more serious, and I ended up there. I still don't know why. Gina and Rhonda exchanged glances while May continued to watch Brooklyn. It was a familiar story. And it was good, you know? Exciting, mysterious, wrong, indecent. I don't know, it was just fun. I almost lost my mind. I did something I shouldn't have done. Anyway, we did it. I couldn't stop myself. Suddenly it became the worst thing I could have done. Brooklyn fell silent and looked at the other women and their reactions, her face reflecting her fear of judgment. No need to go into details, dear, May said gently. We don't need details if you're uncomfortable. Rhonda and Gina remembered their first meeting with the group. It took them a while to get the details out of them, but Brooklyn seemed to have no trouble recounting all the horrible details. Apparently, it was part of her nature. With this girl, there was no escaping the detailed truth. I couldn't even look at Josh for the rest of the party, and as for having fun with him, forget it. I couldn't do it with him. I felt like he would just have to look at me and he would know what I had done. He would have understood, but he didn't. He wondered what was wrong with me because I was so quiet and restless, but he just said he'd give me space and be there when I wanted to talk. Yeah, right, a Boy Scout, just like I said. Talk to him? Yeah, like I was going to do that. I spent the whole week going over what I had done in my head, trying to understand what it was. I swore I would never be alone with Michael again. I wasn't in love with him. I was more interested in what we were doing than in him, you know? She glanced anxiously at the other women, and Gina and Rhonda looked at her again, this time with forced smiles that meant, yes, they knew exactly what she was talking about. Gina said quietly, yes, and Rhonda just nodded. May patted Brooklyn on the arm and said, we understand, Brooklyn. We understand all too well. We understand. Brooklyn took a deep breath and continued. Well, my resolve lasted 2 weeks. Then, when Josh left for some evening meeting, Michael showed up. I didn't even want to let him in, but he said he needed to borrow one of Josh's tools, and I had to let him in. The kids were at a friend's house, and within 3 minutes, he was already entertaining me. And the worst part, the last word sounded like a sob. I wanted it. I don't know. I could barely look Michael in the eye. That's how it started. Michael would show up sometimes when he knew Josh wasn't home and the kids were busy. We didn't talk much. We didn't even mention Josh, the kids, or his fiancée. Those were topics we never touched on. We both understood that it was a kind of truce, you know? There was no love there. We even invited his fiancée and him over for dinner, and when they came, there were no longing glances. There was no indication that there was any kind of relationship between us. I was just his toy. His toy. And he was mine. I felt guilty, but it was as if it was just part of my consciousness. I remained the same wife I had always been. There were moments when I rejected Josh. There were a few times when I showed romantic feelings toward him. I needed to make sure that I still loved my husband, and I did. And I still do. It wasn't anything else. It was even better because I had something to compare it to, Michael's lack of love. Josh was gentle. He loved me and didn't rush me. And then everything went wrong. It all came out. Brooklyn wiped her eyes as she said the last sentence, and emotions poured out of her. I still don't know how Josh found out. I guess it doesn't matter. Michael called me and said, he knows, and hung up. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if Josh really knew. If he did, to what extent and what exactly. Did he know we were doing it in our house and what he might know? I didn't know if I should leave or what to do. So I cleaned the house and waited for him to come home. He didn't come, at least not that night. I didn't know if I should call him, wait for him, or do something else. The children asked where he was, and I said he was busy at work. He showed up 3 days later looking terrible. I didn't know what to do. I tried to go up to him and hug him, but he wouldn't even touch me. He was in such a state, and he was hurting from what he was saying. He called me a whore and a slut. Later, I found out that he had attacked Michael and disowned him as his brother. And he gave his parents an ultimatum. They had to do the same. Otherwise, they would lose him as a son. He told Michael's fiancée about it, and now she's going to be looking for me. I didn't know what to do. I tried to talk to him, but he just kept saying, "Shut up and get out." 4 days later, I was served with a court summons. They even had our photos. He told me to leave. I started packing the kids' things, and he grabbed me and yelled that I was leaving and they were staying. I was scared for the first time, so I gathered everything I could and left as quickly as possible. He was unshaven, angry, his eyes were red, and he was so angry. I understand him. I betrayed him and his brother. But I was scared. He was so angry. I had never seen him like that. I don't think he would have hurt me, but his eyes were so wild. Gina and May exchanged sympathetic glances. "It's okay. That's in the past. This is the present. No one here is judging you," May said gently. Brooklyn sniffed quietly, then smiled shyly at the three women. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought it was all over." She gathered her thoughts, then smiled, both bold and vulnerable. "So, here I am, in a shabby one-room apartment. He's on trial for adultery. His brother has completely disowned the family. I see the children and they still don't quite understand what's going on. Josh doesn't hide them from me, but he makes sure we don't cross paths when I come over. I pick them up from his parents and bring them back." Brooklyn paused, staring at the Dalek. Then she whispered, "But that's not the worst part." The other three women just stared at her as she looked from one face to another. "I don't know if I can say this out loud," she said, lowering her gaze to the floor again. After a few moments of silence, she said impulsively, "I'm still doing it." There was a shocked silence as the other women processed the news. "He calls me sometimes. He tells me to come to the motel. And for some reason I go," she said listlessly, still staring at the floor. "I have nothing else to do. Josh gives me enough money to live on, but that's it. I've thought about going back to work. I've thought about killing myself, but then I remember my children. But when Michael calls, I go. It's mechanical. I don't even know why I go. I guess now he wants revenge for everything." After this confession, there was silence as each of the women tried to cope with the shock and decide how to respond. May was the first to recover. She said calmly, "Well, I have to ask, do you want this? To go to him?" Brooklyn whispered, "No," and continued to stare at the carpet. Then, May said again, "I think we need to do something. Rhonda, do you have a spare room?" Rhonda nodded. "I think young Brooklyn should stay with you. Everything will be fine now, right?" It was more of a statement than a question, but Rhonda didn't pay any attention to that. She partly understood what was going on in Brooklyn's head and wanted to help. She nodded vigorously. "Of course I'll help. I'll take Brooke home and help her get ready. Is that okay with you, Brooke?" Brooklyn looked up, tears smearing her makeup. "You'll do that?" "Of course," Gina replied softly. "We'll work everything out. You need support and help. That Kusapaya is after you. You need help to stand up to him and get him away from you, and we're here to help you." "Then it's settled," May said with some satisfaction. "Brooklyn, you can stay with Rhonda until you get settled. She'll drive you around and keep that disgusting man away from you." To be honest, he got what he deserved for seducing his own brother's wife. It's the truth. Everyone sat down for a moment, and Brooklyn took a pack of facial tissues out of her purse and began to wipe away the traces of mascara. "Are you seeing a therapist, dear?" May asked after a few minutes of reflection. "No. I've thought about it, but I don't know how to find one. I want to go to a marriage counselor with Josh, but he doesn't want to talk to me about it." May nodded. "Well, I think that's perfectly normal, dear. Given the situation and his low opinion of you, he doesn't want to hear your voice right now. And I'm not sure he's wrong or that it's a bad thing. While it's true that there's only a certain amount of time when change is possible, it's also true that if the hurt party isn't willing to even try at this point, nothing will work. It's better to spend time figuring yourself out, understanding what happened, finding help and resources to deal with it, and then coming back and trying to talk. It may be too late, but going into a meeting with despair in your heart isn't the best option either. The fact that he's talking to you at all, rather than cutting you off completely, is already a big plus. Gina interjected. Brooklyn, try my friend. She's really good. What about that guy Diana was seeing? May asked. Gina shook her head. She needs a woman, May. Look at her. May looked at Brooklyn, who was quietly crying again. Yeah, you're probably right. Can you imagine Gina? May asked. Of course I can. You know you can, Gina replied, glad to be able to offer something substantial. I don't know if I can afford it. I'm still on Josh's health insurance, and I'm not sure if it's covered. Hush, girl, May said a little sharply. She continued in a softer voice. We can help. You just need to talk to a qualified professional. We can offer support, but we're not therapists and don't claim to be. Don't worry about the cost. We'll figure that out later. Brooklyn wiped her face with the napkin she was holding, looked at the other women, and asked timidly, Why? Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I don't know you. Why are you trying so hard to help me? There was surprise in her voice, but it was a fair question. In fact, it was the main question of the evening, the reason she was in May's house. May made a sound like, the kind of sound people make when they're about to give a long, detailed answer. Well, she said on the third try, we all have a past. You've heard us say many times that we've all been there and done that. Those aren't just words. All three of us have made questionable decisions in the past. We've all hurt other people, made mistakes, and then often compounded them. We've created a kind of support network for those who, like us, have made mistakes and need a safe place to talk about it, deal with it, and either commit to trying to make amends or, if necessary, move on. Brooklyn recoiled slightly and said, You all screwed up like me? Oh, baby, Gina said with a smile. You have no idea. Really? Brooklyn asked, with a barely perceptible smile on her face. They were meeting for the first time. Oh, yes, Rhonda interjected firmly, very seriously. Actually, said May, on our first meeting we usually discuss our situation so you understand that we're not here to judge or manipulate you. Would you like to hear our stories? To understand who we are and why we can be so easygoing about your situation? Brooklyn looked at May for a few seconds, trying to understand her words, then looked at Gina and Rhonda and nodded vigorously, almost surprised. Okay, who wants to start? May asked, standing up. I'll go make myself some hot chocolate. Gina? Rhonda? Gina and Rhonda looked at each other, and there was a moment of silence until Gina said with slight irritation, Of course I'll go first. No one noticed that, at that moment, May had gone to the kitchen so she wouldn't be the first. It was a typical move for May. While May was in the kitchen, Gina put down her coffee and settled into her chair. Well, let's see, she began. Where should I start? I'm Gina Trellis. I used to be Gina Neep, but not anymore. I'm 38 years old. I've been divorced for almost 4 years. I work as a teacher at a community college. Not a full professor, more of a mid-level instructor teaching adult classes, both for high school equivalency and for college preparation. I teach English mostly, although I also teach some physical education classes. I spend a lot of time at the gym and moonlight as a pole dancing instructor. I also teach belly dancing, but to be honest, most of the girls just want to learn how to spin around a pole without looking stupid. She paused and smiled shyly. Yes, I know. It's embarrassing. But, she shrugged, it pays the bills. And you wouldn't believe the body control it takes to hang upside down on a pole for 10 minutes. I was married to Scott. He was wonderful, she said with a hint of sadness. Everything was wonderful. It was like a perfect marriage, very much like yours, Brooke. We met right after college. Before Scott, I was a party girl. I went to parties, dated a few guys, and slept with some of them, like all girls do. But I went a little further than that. But when I met Scott, all the partying stopped and I was completely happy. No hard feelings or anything like that. I had fun, I enjoyed myself, and I saw what was there, and it didn't bother me at all. I chalked it up to life experience and didn't think about it anymore. I had already tried to become a student teacher, but in this city it was a nightmare. I met Scott at a party organized by the university alumni club. It turned out he was also a graduate, just from a different campus. It was love at first sight. I was smitten, and so was he. All those cliché, silly things you hear people say. It was all true. Hearts, flowers, stars in his eyes, it was all true. We spent the entire evening discussing how many children we would have, where we would live, and what religion we would raise them in. It sounds very silly now. We were children. We grew up on Disney romance. I thought it would last forever, and so did he. And for a while, it seemed like it would. By this point, May had returned just in time to hear Gina's last words. To everyone's surprise, she nodded in time with Gina's words, expressing her agreement with her in sign language. We started dating quickly, moved in together after 3 months, and got married 9 months later. And everything was wonderful. We had so much in common. He was a sports massage therapist. He knew all the right buttons to push, I can tell you. And yet, as with everything, closeness doesn't breed contempt, right? But it definitely bred complacency. I look back and I don't understand what happened. I was teaching, and this guy came along, you know? There's always that guy, Gina said, making quotation marks with her fingers. I don't know. Scott worked a lot, and this guy was interesting. We didn't have kids. We were both thriving in our careers, and Scott thought we'd have to move around a lot because of his job and everything, so we put it off. It was just the two of us. He worked a lot, did everything he could to get a job as a massage therapist for one of our Olympic teams. I started teaching at a gym. I started with yoga. This guy, Donnie, also worked at the gym as a personal trainer. Well, I'm sure you don't need an introduction. He came to my yoga class to get in shape. Yeah, right. I think he was pretty tough. I should have been stronger, but one night it just happened. Like you said, Brooke, it suddenly became the most important thing in the world. I don't know why. Well, I don't think you have to be a genius to guess where that led. The only thing that stopped us for a second was that he ran to the office to turn off the lights and the video recording system, and then we continued. I never thought about Scott, not about love or a long-term relationship. Well, that's how I justified it to myself afterwards. The guilt remained, but to be honest, it wasn't that strong. Scott would never find out, and it didn't matter to me at all. Over the next few weeks, I did it with Donnie 3 or 4 more times just when the opportunity arose. To his credit, he never pursued me or did anything like that. It only happened when the opportunity arose. I think it meant as little to him as it did to me. We were friends, nothing more. You see, the thing is, I remember sitting at home one day after the first time, thinking about it with a bottle of wine, trying to figure out why I did it, because I loved Scott so much. Why would I do that? And then I realized, because it was outside of Scott's life and mine, it didn't affect her in any way. It was stupid. But in that moment, I understood. I didn't stop loving Scott. I tried to figure out what I liked and didn't like about the new guy, what his tricks might be. Nothing else. Nothing else. I guess I didn't realize that if it was so unimportant, I could have just not done it. At the time, it didn't matter at all to my life with Scott. I loved him just as much, even more, because I understood even more how unique he was, what he meant to me. Of course, it was wrong, but in the end, I was convinced that no one could compare to Scott and me. For a while, all the women sat in silence, sipping their coffee. May got up, threw a couple more logs on the fire, and then sat back down to listen to what Gina had to say. The women pondered Gina's words, analyzing her statements and trying to relate them to their own experiences. But, Gina continued, I obviously didn't think it through. Just because it didn't mean anything to me doesn't mean it won't mean something to someone else, like Scott or some other admirer. And that's exactly what happened. Donnie, it was purely physical attraction. I think he liked me, but once he got what he wanted, the whole relationship became mechanical. We had a few flings, and then he moved to Idaho without looking back, and I didn't even bother to say goodbye. That should give you an idea that, well, there was no relationship between us. I felt like I had already made up my mind. I needed to find the positive in what I had done, and that was it. I wasn't looking for other extracurricular activities, but if they happened, Scott had nothing to do with it. I still adored him, and he adored me. It's amazing how easy it is to deceive yourself, isn't it? As I said, I teach at a college. I teach English, specializing in creative writing. For several years after Donnie left, and in those years I had no one but Scott, I was teaching, and a young writer, actually a poet, was taking my classes. He had already been published and was successful, but, as he put it, success made me realize how much I didn't know, and how much I relied on an editor to fix my commas. He felt that by becoming a better storyteller, he had become a less witty writer. Interesting, isn't it? So he went back to community college to refocus on the mechanics of writing. And that's how I met Leo. He was younger than me, only 23. He was a poet, one of those passionate poets who read their poetry and get all excited. He was also handsome. Impressive. Gina glanced at the unsympathetic faces of May, Rhonda, and Brooklyn. Well, he knew. She apologized, a little flustered. It didn't hurt that he was dark, gothic, and interesting, but one night it happened. I was curious to see if the fire and brimstone of his readings would translate to the bedroom. As it turned out, it did. He was good. We had a great time. By that point, I had long since gotten over my guilt. I had worked hard to convince myself that if it didn't mean anything to me, it shouldn't mean anything to anyone else. We did it 6 or 7 times, and I didn't think much of it. But then he started pursuing me. I didn't pay much attention to it. He saw much more in our relationship than I did. I mean, I should have known. After all, he was a poet, all emotion and no logic. I told him it was just a physical connection. I love my husband, and he would never replace him for me, no matter what he thought. We could have fun, but that was all. Of course, he didn't listen. He didn't see the signs. The fact that he wrote a poem about me seemed sweet, but I didn't read it carefully. He waited until the evening reading, when he knew Scott would be there with me, to read his work, and at the end, confess his love for me and ask me to leave Scott and become his muse in front of everyone. He thought it would be a really powerful moment. Scott thought it was all ridiculous until Leo explained that we were already intimate. Scott was furious. I'd never seen anything like it. I didn't know Scott could be like that. He flipped over a large, heavy table to reach Leo, who suddenly became frightened. You could see it in his eyes. It's one thing when a crowd of emotional people comes on stage believing your every word, but it's quite another when a very angry man, capable of breaking you in half with one hand, tries to push people away to get to you and do just that. Gina paused, slightly out of breath. Her eyes widened slightly as she replayed the episode in her mind. Scott looked at me when Leo made his statement, and I just couldn't react. He knew right away that it was true, and he just went berserk. He hit Leo with one punch and knocked him flat on his back, and then everyone jumped on him. They held him while the others pulled Leo away. They tried to take me away, but I was hysterical and didn't want to leave, pushing away several people who were trying to hold me back. The police arrived, and there were many witnesses who pointed at Scott. Everything came out. By that time, Scott had calmed down a bit, but he didn't talk to me or even look at me. They took Scott away to be processed, and I followed them in our car. They didn't release him that night, but they let him go the next day. When Leo left, there was no evidence to detain him or anyone else and press charges. I'll never forget how he came out. He was unshaven, his eyes were red, he smelled bad, and he didn't even look at me. He just got in the car and we drove home. Not a word was said. I didn't know what to say or do. A couple of times I tried to say something, but he stopped me with a look. We got home, he got his things, and I, knowing where this was going, wouldn't let him leave. I stood in front of the door and begged him to talk to me. I asked him to hit me, beat me up, yell at me, anything. But he just stood there and waited, not saying a word, just get out of my way, leave me alone, and things like that. It was a dead end. In the end, I realized that I couldn't keep him if he really wanted to leave. I couldn't make him stay, so I let him go. I didn't know what else to do. I needed to give him time and space to figure out his feelings. The only thing I knew was that we needed to meet and talk, so I could explain that I loved him and only him. That all my other flings were nothing. You see, even when I was faced with the reality that what was nothing to me was everything to Scott, I still couldn't understand his point of view. I believed more in my own fantasies than in his reality, a reality that I had created myself. There was a pause, and then Gina continued. He left, and I didn't see or hear from him for a whole week. Then I got a job offer. I was desperate, a complete mess, and I was sent home. After that, I saw him once. Can you imagine that? I talked him into meeting me for dinner so I could explain everything. I was so nervous. It didn't work. I didn't know what to say. Just a bunch of cliches. It doesn't mean anything. I just love you. We'll work it out. I'm sorry. What else can you say in a situation like that? He made sure I wasn't left without any money. We sold the house, and I rented a small one-room apartment in Des Plaines. I never found out where he moved. His friends went back to their homes, and although they were polite to me, they kept their distance. And his family? Let's not go there. It was ugly. I didn't get the slightest hint of where Scott was or how he was feeling. I was going crazy. What was he thinking? How much it must hurt. Without thinking, Gina twisted her hair in her hand. She wasn't talking to anyone in particular anymore, just talking to the world. I'm seeing a therapist. The one we're sending you to, Brooke. She helped me finally understand that I had tried so hard to convince myself that it didn't mean anything. And I truly believe that I didn't even consider what it might mean to someone else. After all, if it didn't mean anything to me, then it shouldn't mean anything to anyone else, right? I practiced self-justification so diligently that I didn't notice how consciously I was ignoring thoughts about how it might affect Scott. And now, I think I did that because I knew how it would end. And so I tried so hard to cloud my own mind so I would never have to think about it. Gina returned to reality and smiled sadly but regretfully at the other women. It seems like you can really get yourself tangled up in things, huh? Brooklyn looked at her in horror and asked uncertainly, "What happened? Did you explain?" "Oh, I explained everything, or tried to. Like I said when we were sitting there having dinner, I tried to tell him that I love him and only him. That everything that happened only made me more sure of that. A terrible choice of words, if such a thing is possible, girls. I explained that it had nothing to do with him, that he was wonderful and handsome, and that I was the one who had ruined everything. I did everything you're supposed to do in situations like that. I promised him anything he wanted if he would give me another chance. He sat there and listened, and then finally said that it was all bullshit, that if I was happy, I would never have strayed, that there must be something wrong with our relationship if I was looking for someone else. I didn't know how to argue with that. There was nothing wrong with our relationship, but I did it anyway. I tried to explain that in college I was a very free person, but at the time, partying was just a fun way to pass the time, and that was all. That made him even angrier. He said, "If it meant so little, why did I do it? Why risk your marriage for something that means nothing?" That was another good point. The therapist doesn't know how to answer that question either, except to say, "You could, so you did." It's not a very good answer, even now. It makes me sound like a selfish bitch. And he asked another question. If it was so innocent, why did I hide it from him? Why didn't I tell him about it and even encourage him to have a little harmless affair on the side? If there was nothing to it, why hide it? I didn't know how to answer that question. But then I drove the final nail into the coffin. He casually asked me if Leo was my first. I replied emphatically that, of course he was. I didn't even think about Donnie. The whole experience had been so insignificant that I didn't even remember it. I wasn't consciously trying to lie. He didn't matter to me, and I didn't even think about him. It had been years ago and I hardly remembered it, and I wasn't supposed to think about it. But somehow Scott found out. I had no idea anyone knew about our relationship. Of course, I hadn't told anyone, and no one else was around when we played. Maybe Donnie did, I don't know. In any case, Scott knew. At least he knew something was wrong. As soon as he brought it up, I stopped. In the end, he was right. When I tried to talk to Scott, I didn't even bring it up because it was pointless. But not with him. He knew right away that I was hiding something, even though I was only doing it because it was so insignificant. I wasn't trying to deceive him, it just didn't occur to me that I should mention it. Well, that's it. If there was any trust, it's gone now. He just looked at me and said something like, "Well, if that's what you want, forget about it." Then he handed me a flash drive with a recording, which I listened to later. Someone at the gym told me about one of my encounters with Donnie. It turned out we weren't as alone as I thought. I never saw him again in person. He didn't show up for the divorce hearing. Only his lawyer did. We divided everything. There were no children, and that was the end of it. I didn't have much of a choice. I heard from a mutual friend that he moved to San Diego to start over. He went as far away as he could to get away from me and the memories of this place. Every now and then, I see photos of him on Facebook with comments from our mutual friends. He looks good, but I know he doesn't want to talk to me. Brooklyn reached out and took Gina's hand. "I'm so sorry. How are you doing? How are you living?" Gina shrugged obediently. "I'm getting by. You have to. You can't just lie there and suffer. It takes time to gain independence. Find your place, deal with all the crap, all the distractions. And only when you're settled does the suffering take over. But I'm lucky. May found me and helped me move on. Don't get me wrong, I regret everything. Everything I did, the results, the disastrous consequences, I really do. And this little group isn't here to stop me. But therapy and May have helped me get through it. It's part of me, and it always will be. But at some point, you have to let go of the poor me and start living again. So I go on dates sometimes, and it's funny because nothing makes you realize what you've lost, like dating. Sometimes I meet someone nice and we have a good time, but I'm pathologically unable to allow myself too much happiness. I feel like I'm going to mess it up again, and these guys don't deserve that. I come and talk to May and Rhonda, who understand me, and we try to support and accompany those who have made similar mistakes. I miss Scott more than I can put into words. I miss who he was, how we were together, all the silly things we did. But I made this mess, and now I'm in it, and I'm trying to do the best I can. The best I can do is set an example and hope that one day I'll meet another Scott and be in a place where I can accept him, she said with a sigh. Brooklyn took a big gulp and impulsively reached out to hug Gina, which surprised Gina, but she agreed anyway. These days, any touch was pleasant to Gina. She was surprised at herself for missing human contact so much after breaking up, especially when it was unexpected and freely given without any thoughts of reciprocity. That's my story. It's terrible and it doesn't have a happy ending, at least not yet, but at least it proves that life goes on. Okay, I need some more coffee. Rhonda, you're next. Gina stood up, more to give herself time to deal with the tears welling up than for anything else. Desperately looking for a way to diffuse the tension in the air, Rhonda said wistfully, "Well, screw her, Gina. I liked having fun with her." And just like that, Brooklyn and May smiled, and even Gina laughed for a moment. "So what's your story?" Brooklyn asked, genuinely interested. She was beginning to relax in the company of these women and didn't feel judged. She was among equals. With a questionable past, no doubt, but still among equals. "Oh," said Rhonda, waving her hand dismissively. "My husband and I had, how should I put it, we broke up with a few people. It was fun, but it got out of hand. He got dumped, basically. That's all?" There was a silence, and May, sipping her hot chocolate, just stared at Rhonda. Rhonda stared back defiantly. May pressed her lips together and was about to say something, but Rhonda relaxed her grip. "Oh, okay," she whispered, looking at the floor in disgust. "Okay, my story. Fine." "If you don't want to," Brooklyn said, reaching out to Ron. "No, May's right. We have to do this. It's hard. Like pulling a Band-Aid off a wound that hasn't healed yet." The girls waited for Rhonda to gather her thoughts. "Okay, here goes. Yes, well, I'm Rhonda Frey. I'm Finnish by birth and upbringing. I came to America on an exchange program when I was 18, and I managed to get into Northwestern University. I got a student visa, stayed, and fell in love with this place. I love Chicago. I love America. I'm a citizen now, you know? I'll never go back to Finland, the land of eternal sunshine for half the year and eternal darkness the rest of the time. It's cold and dreary there. Here you can be free and go from sunshine to snow in an hour. There are beaches everywhere, and there's so much to do. It's wonderful. And the men, oh, the men. I could ride a different cowboy every day." Everyone was smiling. Her enthusiasm was contagious. "When I was a senior in college, I studied engineering, and I'll tell you girls, if you want to be pampered, engineering is the way to go. All these men, and they have no choice. There just aren't that many beautiful women in engineering. I know that's rude, but I was Miss January, Miss February, and Miss March. You know what I mean. Anyway, when I was in high school, I met Jocelyn. I was so simple back then, so small. And he, Jocelyn, was so sophisticated, so educated. He could feel comfortable anywhere. He was a man of the world, and I was right there with him. It was great. His parents had money, and he had a trust fund. He wasn't super rich, but he didn't have to worry about his next paycheck. He was the connector. It was weird. He didn't so much make deals as he brought people together who made deals, and for his services, he got a cut of the profits. His family was well known in Chicago, and he had access to everyone, and he could do that across social classes. He was equally comfortable in a bar on the South Side and at Fleming's Steakhouse, and he took me with him. It was exciting. I met him at a college fundraiser. A handsome engineering student never hurts. And we hit it off right away. I learned so much from him. My world and my mind expanded. It was a whirlwind romance, just like in the movies. He was kind to me. Kind. He took the time to explain everything I didn't know about this country. Well, I'm sure you can guess how it ended. We got married 10 months after we met. My parents came over from Finland and hated America from the moment they set foot in the country. But they smiled and endured it for my sake. Put up with, Gina interjected, smiling. What? Rhonda asked. It's put up with, past tense. Not put up with. Sorry, I'm an English teacher, I can't help it. Rhonda looked at Gina for too long, then continued. Yes, they put up with me. She made quotation marks with her fingers. Gina took her coffee and smiled back at her. 13 years in this country and she still corrects me. Rhonda rolled her eyes. Gina's smile grew even wider. Anyway, Rhonda said sarcastically, we were married. Everything was fine. I had 2 children like a good wife should. We had a boy, Xander, and a girl, Lena. Everything was fine for about 4 or 5 years, and then everything went wrong. You know how it is. I love my children, but I felt like I was living their lives, not my own. Joss and I started spending less time together. He had more things to do, and he started traveling a lot for work. Brooklyn bit her lip and looked at Rhonda. Rhonda noticed and replied indignantly, No, that's not how it was. I didn't sleep with anyone else while he was at work. He came home, the deal was done, and we talked. I mean, we really talked. About what we wanted, about how our lives weren't that interesting. We could talk, you know? Whenever we wanted. We both realized that life wasn't that interesting and we wanted to solve that problem. And we talked to each other. Rhonda stared into space for a moment with a wistful expression on her face. A second later, she shook her head and continued. Anyway, we wanted to bring some excitement back into our lives. So we started talking about our fantasies. We started talking about our relationship, how strong it was, and what we could do to stay in a good relationship. I know we wanted to have a threesome with another woman. All men want that, don't they? All the women smiled and nodded. We discussed it, how it could happen. And I said that if he was going to have a threesome with a woman, what about me? Would I have a threesome with another man? How would he feel about that? I didn't feel threatened by the other woman at all. We talked for a long time about what we could do, what we could and couldn't do, and so on. I had to see it. I had to understand what it meant. I'm an engineer, for God's sake. I'm logical and I can understand how one thing leads to another. But I missed this important event. That's the right word, isn't it? Important? In the end, we decided to give it a try. And we tried. It was interesting. But Joss didn't like it at all. That's obvious now. I was so selfish. I got what I wanted. No, what I didn't even know I wanted. And he got almost nothing, just watching me have fun. He could have said no, but he didn't. But at that moment, as he said later, he dismissed me. He understood what I was saying. He didn't say yes or no. He let me decide. He reacted to what I decided to do. That night when we got home, we were estranged from each other. He wasn't going to come back. He was so angry with me, and I was just taking my anger out on him. It was just awful. He was in so much pain, and I just wanted to hug him. But he left the bedroom and the house. He didn't come back for 3 days. I called him and left messages, but I didn't know where he had gone. He finally came back. He had been out drinking with his friends. Our relationship was never the same again. Every time we got close, I felt like someone else was there. I realized I was on thin ice and just decided to ignore the situation. Some time passed, and everything was pretty much back to normal. It was his birthday, I booked a hotel room, and I think he had a good time. But I was very careful. I didn't want any bad memories to come back to him. So everything was fine until Halloween. We had a tradition. We always went trick-or-treating with the kids who lived next door to his parents. They live in Palatine, and their neighborhood is very popular for that kind of thing. It's where they go for Halloween. Where we lived, there was nothing like that. And then they would stay with their grandparents and eat all the candy because their grandparents spoiled them. And we would go to a party instead. We might end up on Rush Avenue and Division or at a party at one of Joss's friends' houses. And this year, Joss left town. He had a financial contract for some TV show and had to be in Los Angeles for Halloween. I sat there thinking about what to do. The kids would be happy with their grandparents and I would be left alone. And I did something really stupid. I dressed up and went to a club. Halloween is a huge party for clubs like that. even bigger than New Year's Eve. I thought, Joss will never find out, and I could have some fun, and this time no one would be upset. Looking back, I think, how could I have been so stupid? Things were getting better with Joss, but I couldn't stop thinking about how good it was there, and I wanted more. But I didn't want Joss to be angry with me, and it seemed like the easiest way out. No one got hurt, and of course, I didn't do it out of love. But I went anyway. The classes were great. Every couple of months, I'd find an excuse to go alone. I made sure Joss had everything he needed. Everything was fine, until it all fell apart. Rhonda paused to take a drink. When she looked up again, all three women were staring at her. One day, Joss was at a golf tournament in Milwaukee and stayed there overnight. I went and, as usual, had a good time. Long story short, there was another couple there that night that I didn't know, just saw briefly. But they knew me, and they knew Joss. And when they saw me, they couldn't believe it. Of course, they told Joss. He hadn't been in Milwaukee for a week, and I didn't know he knew about my business. He just said I had things to do. When he came back, a private investigator found out from the club's records that I had been there, filed an affidavit, and somehow convinced some of the people I hung out with to testify. I had another meeting with Dan and Sandy. They were the ones who told me how much pain I had caused Joss. By that time, everything had come out. I met them at TGI Fridays, of all places. I was there to meet someone, and they were sitting at the bar watching hockey. I sat down with them, and they talked a little bit about what I was doing, about how I was going to the club alone, and about how their conversation with me about balance was useless to me. All their "it doesn't matter" was based on balance, right? It only doesn't matter when there's balance, when both sides are equal, even over time. And in our case, that wasn't happening. I was just making the debt situation worse. I didn't even think about that. I just thought that when we went, it wasn't good for him. He was refusing, but I was still interested. The thing is, as my therapist pointed out, I knew I shouldn't have done it, even if I ignored his influence. I knew that otherwise I would have said something, but I didn't. I don't know. Rhonda's pronunciation became clearer, more broken, and as she spoke, her vowels became more pronounced. The more emotion she felt, the more her American accent disappeared. After I was kicked out, Joss came over one day and just threw all his stuff out of the house. He ended up moving to Minneapolis. He was humiliated, just like his whole family. Remember, they were well known in Chicago, but he had no choice. He ended up becoming a business professor at the University of Minneapolis. He took the kids with him. He had top-notch lawyers who were friends of his family. And me? Well, I hung out at the club. I knew it wasn't a beauty contest. I get the kids one weekend a month, all the holidays, and 6 weeks in the summer. It's not much, but I still keep in touch with them. We Skype a lot. It's more than I deserve. There was a silence as the women digested the latest story. I miss the life I had. We were a real family. I'm so sorry, said Brooklyn, genuinely moved by Rhonda's story. Like Gina before her, she reached out to touch Rhonda's hand. Rhonda put her hand on Brooklyn's shoulder and said, "It's okay. I made this mess. We all make messes. We just have to learn to accept it and move on. Someday I'll learn. In the meantime, I'm going to have fun with attractive men." The last part was said with feigned bravado, but it broke the tension. Then Rhonda said hesitantly, "Want to know the strangest thing? Even though we're divorced, we still see each other sometimes. When he's in town, he calls and we meet at his hotel. It took a while, but now it's just what we do. He even asked if I still performed in clubs, and I told him the truth, yes, sometimes. And he asked what I did for a living. He wasn't trying to tease me. He was just curious. And I'll tell you, girls, if I could get him to go out with me one more time, I'd make him the happiest man in the world." Then she added, "Well, a girl can dream. I just want him to be with me." I don't think it was the club that broke us up, it was how I behaved there. I went too far and destroyed his faith and trust in me. If I hadn't messed up, there was a hint of sadness in Rhonda's voice, but after a moment she shrugged and said, "Joka meni G moistily sit G, tikula silman." Brooklyn looked at Rhonda in confusion, and she replied, "It's a Finnish proverb. It means a stab in the eye for those who live in the past." "Ah," said Gina wisely, as if she understood what Rhonda was talking about. "How about some more coffee? I think the coffee pot is ready," said May, getting up from her chair. She picked up the coffee pot and hummed to herself as she walked to the kitchen. Gina looked at Rhonda and asked quietly, Do you think she'll tell us everything? Everything? I don't know, Rhonda replied. Brooklyn looked back at them both in confusion. What, is she going to tell her story? That's what I was asking. We know some things about her, but we've never told the whole story. To be honest, none of us has ever dared to ask her about it. She has a way of pushing people away, you know? That's the polite way of saying get lost, said Gina. What do you know? Asked Brooklyn. They had a long-term affair. It came out some unpleasant things happened, and that was it, really. Well, I guess that's true, came a voice from behind them. May appeared with a new set of coffee cups. Gina looked at Rhonda in panic. Well, how sweet, May said as kindly as she could, but looking at Gina and Rhonda, her words could not be misunderstood. Rhonda and Gina stared at the floor and the coffee pot respectively, avoiding each other's gaze. So, May, tell us your story, Brooklyn asked innocently, turning to her on her chair. My story, May replied quietly and thoughtfully. Well, yes, it's time, I guess. I've never told anyone the whole story. Parts of it, maybe. Bits and pieces. Things I preferred to share, but maybe it's time. I've been told that bearing your soul is good for your health. She smiled sincerely at Brooklyn, then said quietly, yes, and the two who didn't dare to ask can listen too. Gina and Rhonda looked up and glanced at each other. A broad smile spread across Gina's face, like a teenager who had been caught doing something she wasn't particularly ashamed of. Rhonda smiled back and leaned forward to refill her coffee cup. Is everyone settled? Yes, good, said May, settling back into her chair. So I'm going to tell you about Randall. My Randall. My God, that man was everything to me. I met him in 1975. He had just returned from the embassy in Cambodia, where he had served as a young Marine. Everyone was evacuated when the Khmer Rouge took over Phnom Penh, the capital. She looked at the confused faces of Brooklyn, Gina, and Rhonda. Don't worry about the ancient history. Suffice it to say that he was a young Marine and very handsome. He was with his friend Ronnie Cordell. I knew Ronnie from school. He was an athlete, played soccer, so everyone knew Ronnie. He became friends with Randall when he was in the army, and Randall came here with him on leave. We went to a dance, a disco to be precise, that was back then. I never liked it. But my friends loved to dance, and the Bee Gees and Donna Summer were popular at the time. I was working as a nurse at the time. I met Randall at a club, I don't remember which one, in Champaign-Urbana, where I lived, and fell in love at first sight. I remember what he was wearing, what I was wearing. I even remember what song was playing. It was Donna Summer's Love to Love You Baby. He was wearing jeans, boots, and a plaid shirt, and I was wearing a yellow summer dress. She fell silent, staring into the distance and reminiscing about the past. He was so handsome. He was standing there with a beer in his hand, and I just stared at him. Then Ronnie came over, said hello, and introduced me to Randall, and I stammered and mumbled, and he took pity on me and asked me to dance. It was heaven. He was heaven. I didn't know he was the one I'd been waiting for, but he was. That night, I knew I was going to marry him. We dated 4 times, no sex, thank you. And then he had to leave, back to the service. He wrote every day and called when he could. He came home on leave when he could. He was stationed in Georgia, guarding some base during his 4th leave. He proposed, and I said yes before he even finished. A year later, he was discharged, moved to Urbana to be with me, and we started living together. I lived with him. Even in the 1970s, that wasn't exactly in line with my mother's upbringing, as she put it, but I loved him so much that I did it anyway. A year later, we got married, and it was bliss. The best day of my life. Not like weddings today, small, just our friends, and such a wonderful night. Perfect temperature, not too long, no drunk uncles, just perfect. And the night, oh my God, that man knew how to love. I wasn't a virgin. It was the 70s. Bra burning in the previous decade and everything else meant there was a lot of experimentation. I was that age, and I was exploring a little. I knew the difference between a confident lover and a clumsy one. Or worse, a confident lover whose confidence was misplaced. That's the worst, you know. And luckily, Randall was confident for all the right reasons. Looking back, I still don't know why we waited. I think it was misplaced chivalry, and on my part, an attempt to be like my parents' generation, with a man I really loved. I look at kids today and how they jump into bed with anyone before marriage, and I think it's a healthier lifestyle to know you're right for your partner before you get married. It's better, isn't it? Suffice it to say, Randall was wonderful. Loving, confident, attentive, intelligent, funny, gentle, and yielding when he needed to be, and as solid as a rock when he needed to be. My ideal man. We lived in an apartment in downtown Urbana, and he got a job there as a property manager, or what they would call a construction manager today. He was a handyman, fixing everything that needed fixing, and an office manager, screening new tenants and doing whatever else was necessary. It was a fantastic time. It seemed like anything was possible. He had no family except for a brother in Idaho, whom we visited periodically, and my family, my mother and two sisters. My father died of heart failure in 1972, and his parents were killed in a plane crash in 1968. We were happy. We saved up and bought a small, well, not so small anymore, apartment, and life was good. I worked at a hospital in the oncologist's office, and Randall did things around the house. 3 years after we got married, I got pregnant, and we had Ezra, my little handsome boy. He hated that expression. Then, a year and a half later, Ellie was born, and 2 years after that, Cameron, my youngest son. You can see them in the photos on the mantelpiece. All the women turned to look at the numerous photos on the mantelpiece. Photos of May with her young children, her grown children, individuals in places such as the Grand Canyon and the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Gina and Rhonda had seen them before, but they never knew who was in them. They guessed that it was May's family, but she never talked about it, and they didn't dare ask. That's Randall and the two boys in this photo, she said, sipping her hot chocolate. Randall was a big man, almost 6 feet 2 inches tall. His hair was thinning, but he hadn't succumbed to the dreaded bob cut hairstyle, just a short haircut. Both of his sons were almost as tall as he was in the photo, where they stood in front of the Statue of Liberty. He had piercing blue eyes, which both his sons had inherited. A silly smile showed his sense of humor, as did the fact that he had attached rabbit ears to both his sons' heads, clearly unaware of what he had done. We traveled everywhere. It was our shared passion. All over the United States and all over the world. We went to Egypt, Asia, Europe. I loved London. Randall did too. He stared into the distance for a long time. More memories of better times. He was so good to me, and I was so good to him. We just understood each other, you know? We were the perfect couple. I gave him what he needed, and he gave me what I needed. In the end, it all worked out. He became the owner of the building he managed, and then he bought a few more buildings. By the time we divorced, we had 2 residential buildings, 3 office buildings, and 3 parking lots, as well as 4 duplexes in our own home. After 8 years of marriage, we moved to a much nicer place. It had an indoor pool and even a billiard room. It was very luxurious and cool, I'll tell you. Our Independence Day parties were the talk of the town. I got into politics when the kids were grown. I was bored, so I quit my nursing job when Ellie was born. Randall supported me and even helped finance my first campaign for city council. And there I was, running for mayor, and I won, sort of. I was elected. Those were great times, girls. Like I said, it seemed like anything was possible. And it was, right up until the end. There was a silence during which May just frowned, Rhonda and Gina fidgeted nervously, and Brooklyn sat listening. Well, that was Randall. He was everything to me. That's why it's so hard for me to talk about Dexter. May looked uncertainly at the other women, wondering if she was being reasonable. You started. Don't back down, she thought to herself. They opened their hearts to you, and continued. And Dexter, too. He was everything that Randall wasn't. Or rather, Randall was everything that Dexter wasn't. Randall was stable and reliable. Dexter was flighty and always in a hurry. Randall was the embodiment of determination, while Dexter ran from commitment like it was a cancer. Randall thought everything through carefully, while Dexter did whatever came into his head. Randall had a slow, quiet sense of humor, while Dexter found everything that happened incredibly funny and mocked everything and everyone. Randall worked long and hard to achieve everything he had, while Dexter got everything easily and left just as easily. One day he would spend thousands, and the next he would find he owed thousands. I'm sure you girls know what I mean. He wasn't so much a bad guy, as they say, as he was a little boy. But he was fun, and for some reason we just couldn't leave each other alone. I met him before Randall, and we had a whirlwind romance that lasted 3 or 4 months. It was a dysfunctional relationship which became clear very quickly. Dexter wasn't just a runaway. He had a wandering gaze, wandering hands, and he lacked maturity and conscience. To be honest, after 2 or 3 days in his company, you just had to talk to an adult. But there was something about him, like a wounded bird. It was impossible to resist the urge to stroke him and make him laugh. When I met Randall, I hadn't seen Dexter in months. I knew who Randall was as soon as I met him. He was my other half. But Dexter, he was my playmate, if you know what I mean. He would show up for a few weeks and we would find time to hang out. I just couldn't resist him. Even when we got married, it continued. Like you ladies, I knew exactly who paid my bills, so Dexter was kind of a naughty interlude for me, like a bad habit. He knew he didn't stand a chance of a long-term relationship with me, a real relationship, but he would show up after 8 months in Paris or somewhere else, call me, and we would meet for coffee and then chat for a couple of hours. Oh, you mean slept together, right, May? Gina asked, a little sarcastically. May, the matriarch, stood in front of her, and Gina finally recognized her as a person. Gina couldn't help but feel satisfied. May sighed. If you mean we did physical training, then yes, we did. Dexter had a wild imagination, Randall, not so much. Dexter, on the other hand, could already tell you what you could and couldn't do with her. Randall wasn't boring. But Dexter, well, you just never knew what he was going to do next. It went on like that for years. He was like my second husband, who was often away on business. He would come back and tell me where he had been, what he had done, who he had met. He was never shy about telling me about other women. But then he would stroke my cheek and say, "But none of them are like you, May," and kiss me. And I would just smile at his audacity. I didn't care. He wasn't mine and I wasn't his. I had my own man at home. Dexter was so comfortable. I think that's the best word for him. He even bought me a ring. Inside, it said "always there, waiting," which I think was unusually touching for Dexter at the time. I wore it on my right hand, on the same finger as my wedding ring. I know it's very stupid. Silly, Gina interrupted, instantly cheered up. It's not silly, it's outrageous. To put his mark on yourself and wear it? That's brave, May. May looked calmly at Gina, then said doubtfully, "Yes, you're right. I shouldn't have done it. I knew what it was, what it symbolized. I shouldn't even have thought about it, but I had stupid thoughts about a woman who has everything. A husband she's devoted to and a lover who bites his nails. It was pure pride and stupidity on my part." Fortunately, Randall had no idea what was going on. There was silence as the other women began to realize the gravity of May's actions. To betray the man she supposedly loved with all her heart. It was difficult to understand. They were weak, but they acted consciously. For many years. Back to the story. When he was in town, we found ways to meet, sometimes at his place, and if Randall was in Chicago, we had 2 houses in Chicago, he would come over and sneak into the pool room through the back door. I never let him into the main house. That belonged to Randall and me, not him. You know what's funny? Dexter was so detached from my main life, with Randall and the kids, that I didn't even feel guilty about the time we spent together. I mean, I always did that, and Randall never suffered from it. Dexter was like an old friend I sometimes played sports with. I didn't even think about it. He was like a pair of old slippers or a favorite hairdresser. But we had fun. I learned a few things that I'll definitely apply to my relationship with Randall. We did unusual things that only confirmed that I didn't like them. I won't go into details. Others will be more comfortable here than I am, she said, raising an eyebrow at Rhonda, who just stared back at her. I think a woman should have a bit of mystery, but I'll say that bondage isn't for me. Neither is all that humiliation and abuse. If I'm there, I'm a full participant in what's happening, not some little girl who can be bossed around. And when Dexter brought another man, I kicked them both out, and Dexter didn't show up for almost a year. I have my principles, or I thought I did, she said quietly after a moment. The thing is, when you get away with what you're doing for years, you stop thinking about what you're actually doing, what the consequences might be. It's been part of your life for so long that it seems normal. You stop thinking of it as wrong, even if you try to keep it from anyone else. You stop questioning why things are the way they are, and it becomes part of your life. It's what you do. I had this life. A job in government, my best friend by my side, a love that would never end, and casual fun with an old friend that no one knew about and who posed no threat to any of that. Except myself. Civil service. Strange thing. I was ready for it when the opportunity presented itself. I was a Republican candidate when the Republican Party still stood for something other than big business, religious fanatics, and hypocrisy. Considering that we owned buildings, we were well known in the community, did community work, and I think we had a relatively good reputation. When they came to me, I wasn't surprised. I was already a council member and had been doing a relatively good job dealing with the problems in the Urbana public school system, so I had experience. When the local party approached me, I wasn't particularly surprised. Randall was overjoyed, and I was also very proud and flattered. We just decided together that this was something we could do. I could do the job, and it was a way to serve the community, to leave a legacy after our children, even though they were very important to us. So we got down to business. The party and Randall organized a fund to finance my campaign, and we got started with enthusiasm. I spent my time kissing children and shaking hands, and sometimes kissing hands and shaking children. Gina smiled at the weak joke, and Rhonda just looked at her, not understanding the joke. Brooklyn was simply captivated by May's story. It was long and hard work. Late nights, lots of decisions I had no right to make. Money was spent on flyers, events, advertising, and campaigners. We held dinners and parties at $100 a plate, fundraisers. I showed up all over town helping out at soup kitchens and doing whatever was needed. It was hard work. In the middle of the campaign, Dexter reappeared, back from Hong Kong, where he had been working for some group transporting equipment. Not all of his late nights were devoted to the campaign. He spent some in his motel room or in a pool house. However, I tried to spend more time at home to make sure Randall was okay, but I didn't count on the other side. They wanted the mayor's seat and weren't shy about using underhanded methods to get it. I had no idea they were digging into my past for dirt. Fortunately, I was white. Well, except for Dexter, but to be honest, he was just a piece of furniture to me. But other than him, no one knew about our relationship. I didn't tell anyone, and I don't think he did either, except for the one time he brought him over to our place. There was nothing to find. Of course, that didn't stop them. When they found nothing in my past, they redoubled their efforts. They started stalking me, and that's when everything fell apart. I won the election, but I had barely taken office when an article appeared in the newspaper about the new mayor's morality. If she cheated on her husband, what would she do in office? I was stunned. They had photos of me with Dexter, not very flattering photos that had been censored. There was no way to refute them. It was the end of my career as mayor. I resigned before I even took office. The city council had to elect a new mayor. It was complete chaos. But everything that happened to my career was nothing compared to what happened to my relationship. Randall was devastated. I saw him at home the day after the article came out. He was in despair. He asked me if it was true, and I couldn't even look him in the eye, at least not without blinking. He knew right away that it was true. I mumbled something. I tried to minimize the damage, to make him understand how little it meant to me that he was my man, my exalted king. Gina and Rhonda looked at each other. Only May could use the word magnificent to describe the breakdown of her marriage. In desperation, I said something very stupid, something like, "In all the time we've been married, have you ever felt for a second that I didn't support you 100%? It was one of the stupidest things I've ever said in my life. Randall was even more devastated. I expected him to be angry, 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 to break things, maybe even hit me, and I would patiently ask him to stop. But he didn't do any of that. He was too good a man for that. I should have known. He just stood there, trembling, with tears on his face. I leaned in to hug him to make everything right like I had done so many times during our marriage. But he didn't care. He pushed me away, and I realized he didn't want any physical contact with me, which was very painful. I was well aware of the damage I had caused, but to face it head-on, well, he just turned and went upstairs, and I followed him, trying to explain how much I loved him and only him, and that this long affair had only strengthened my feelings. May raised her eyebrows at the other women in a self-deprecating gesture. Yes, I really tried to compare a 30-year affair to something beneficial for our marriage. I'm sure you ladies have said equally stupid things when you were sorting out your relationships. It speaks to desperation, to desperate attempts to stop the train from crashing. We've all been there. It was not a pretty sight. I was crying and willing to do or say anything to make it right. It's so funny when we say we're willing to do anything to fix things. I remember Diana saying that to Ryan, and he asked, "What are you willing to do to fix things?" There was no answer, right? But I offered, thinking I could somehow make it work. But it wasn't meant to be. Randall packed his things, military families pack quickly, and just walked past me. I was sobbing and collapsed in the doorway of our bedroom. I tried to grab his leg as he walked past, but he just kept going. Honestly, I don't know who was crying harder, me or him. He was gone in the blink of an eye. I don't need to tell you ladies how bad I felt after that. As I said, I quit over the phone, apologizing to the local party leaders. They said nothing but resignation accepted. I asked them to notify the media, which they did. For the next few days, I hardly left the house. The kids all got in touch with me, and the next day, Cameron came over. He was still in Chicago. He was just worried about me, and I could barely speak. He didn't even ask about the affair, just worried about how I was feeling. Ellie and Ezra arrived at the end of the week. By then, however, word of my actions had already gotten out. Of course, there were no details. No one knew it was permanent. At first, the children comforted me and were just concerned. Then, one by one, they became colder. They were at their father's house, and he had told them some details, such as how long it had been going on. Apparently, he had also started investigating, found Dexter, and after threats from some very large men, Dexter told him everything he thought in full detail. And then he ran away, far, far away. To be honest, I didn't expect anything else from him. Dexter was always more concerned with himself than anything else. So Randall knew everything, or at least everything Dexter told him. I tried to contact him several times. I called, left messages, sent text messages. Text messages were new back then, but Randall was always on top of things. I emailed him, sent letters through his office. When I called his office, his assistant Tracy told me he wasn't in and left a message saying he was away for a while. I had no idea where he was staying, and in a hotel, in one of the apartments in our buildings, I didn't know. May paused, taking a deep breath to get rid of this very emotional memory. As it turned out, the children hadn't heard from him in quite some time. Ezra thought Randall had gone away to heal. Ellie and Cameron were sure he would contact them once he had recovered from the shock. But that didn't happen. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the clock, which seemed louder, and the other women froze, waiting for every word from May. If a pin had dropped on the floor at that moment, it would have sounded like a gong. She looked at them, trying to smile, and the smile hid the pain and turmoil in her eyes. Randall died 4 days before our 30th anniversary, 5 days after he found out what I'd do. Brooklyn sighed softly, and Gina and Rhonda stepped back. May, I'm so sorry, Gina said, sounding rehearsed as she searched for the right words. Yes, I'm sorry for your loss, added Rhonda. Brooklyn just sat there, covering her mouth with her hand in shock, her eyes glistening at the corners. Randall's body was found at a local Marriott hotel 4 days after Cameron last spoke to him. He had been dead for 2 days. According to the coroner's report, it was a massive heart attack caused by stress. Apparently, his heart swelled, froze, and then stopped, and he died almost instantly. That's what they said at the inquest, but I knew better. I know what Randall died of. He died of a broken heart, and I broke it. May's voice faltered on the last sentence, and she searched for a napkin among the coffee utensils on the table so that the other women wouldn't see the tears in the corners of her eyes. When she found it, she looked up and saw that the other women had turned away, respecting her feelings. She wiped her eyes and said, "It's okay, ladies. I'm just being silly and emotional." To her surprise, Brooklyn leaned forward and said sympathetically, "May, that's perfectly normal and understandable. If you've never told this story before, so to speak, now is the time. You need to get it off your chest, and so do we." Gina and Rhonda looked at each other and raised their eyebrows. This new girl had shown a strength that neither of them had expected. Her compassion was surprising and genuine. It's only 4 days until our 30th anniversary. 4 days. My children and I had planned a big party to celebrate my victory in the mayoral election and our anniversary together. There was a dead silence in response to these words, and it was 2 days before his birthday. "Oh my God," Gina whispered. "Damn," Rhonda said quietly. Brooklyn just sat there, stunned. "And I killed him. I'm sure he died of shock because of what I did." No one knew how to respond. Open denial would have been obvious. Finally, Gina made an attempt. "May, you can't know that. If he had an enlarged heart, then he probably had something else that would have caused problems anyway." May just looked at her sadly and replied, "Maybe. But he went into shock and died, and I'm responsible for that shock. I don't think there's any arguing with that." And I have to live with that knowledge. What I did, what I continue to do, didn't just destroy my marriage, it killed the thing I loved most in the world, my husband. It killed a decent and wonderful man, and I live with that every day. Everyone fell silent for a moment, thinking about this sad story. And then May continued. Well, of course I couldn't stay in Champaign-Urbana anymore. For obvious reasons, I became a social outcast. My sisters barely spoke to me. A birthday call, a Christmas card, no invitations to Thanksgiving, as you can imagine. I moved here as soon as I could and bought this apartment. In the end, I got everything that was in our life, the business, the buildings, everything else. I was a very wealthy woman. But the children, it was wrong. I betrayed Randall the entire time we were married, and I didn't deserve any of it. So I took a small amount from the business to survive, and then I gave them everything else. They could manage it, sell it, or do whatever they wanted. It was their birthright, not mine. Neither Gina nor Rhonda knew exactly what May and Randall had inherited after his death. The entire estate, after the will and taxes, amounted to nearly $15 million. May took $2 million for herself and gave the rest to the children. Even now, having paid cash for the house she lived in, she remained a relatively wealthy woman. And quite discreetly, she set up a trust fund for Rhonda's children. They wouldn't know about it until they went to college, but none of them would graduate with debt. The fund was set up in her husband's name. Cameron tolerates my presence for the sake of the children. I spoil my 2 grandchildren to death, at least as much as I'm allowed to. But they don't visit. I think they consider me a bad influence, and I dare say they're not wrong. It's all quite understandable. Ellie talks to me and sometimes comes to visit. She's still not married, and I think she may have found a new boyfriend. She's mentioned him several times, but we're not as close as we used to be. And Ezra, my dear boy, I haven't heard anything about him. At the funeral, he told me that I was dead to him because of what I had done, and he has more than proven that he will keep his promise. I have heard from others that he is married and has 2 children, but I have never seen them, and I suppose I never will. But despite all the misfortunes surrounding my children, what I regret most is that I was unable to properly apologize to Randall. He died without ever knowing that he was my knight in shining armor, that everything I told him was the absolute truth. I loved him with all my heart. Dexter was just entertainment. It was a time when I could be someone other than Mrs. Randall Morgan, even though I loved being her. Dexter was like a beloved pet, and Randall never knew or understood that. I lost the best thing in my life, and now I have this. She pointed to the other women sitting in the living room. Don't get me wrong, ladies, I'm grateful for this. Believe me. But if I had to trade you for Randall, believe me, it wouldn't be an easy decision. Gina chuckled softly, Rhonda smiled briefly, and Brooklyn even smiled sadly. They understood each other. They would have made the same choice. The only reason I'm telling this story, even though these 2 harpies are trying to get it out of me, May said, waving her hand toward Gina and Rhonda, who recoiled in mock horror, is that Dexter died last week. I got a message from an old friend from school in Urbana. I thought about going to the funeral, but in the end, I decided it was better not to go. Dexter already took enough from me, or rather, I already gave enough. I need to pay my respects to Randall, and showing up at Dexter's funeral would send the wrong message. It's not much, but it's all I can do. She took the last sip of her cold chocolate, grimaced, and quickly set the cup aside. So, that's the whole story. Brooklyn, I hope you understand that we understand your situation. We're not going to excuse what you've done and continue to do, which is reprehensible. But you know that, and we won't talk about it. All we can offer is support, advice, and a place where you don't have to constantly defend yourself. If you're interested, we're here. Rhonda already said she'd be happy to take you in for a while, if only to help you curb those self-destructive impulses coming from your brother-in-law. This has to end, and I think you know that. Temporary relief from guilt is one thing, but it only prolongs the agony. If Josh, right? If he's still talking to you, it will stop if it continues and comes to the surface, as I'm sure you understand. But even without that, you see who we are, what we've been through. You can see that we just want to help. Are you interested? I can guarantee you'll find understanding here, lots of sarcasm and juicy gossip. We'll be here for you. We won't help you destroy your ex, but we'll be here to help you pick up the pieces of your life. Sounds good? Brooklyn looked at May, her eyes shining, then at Gina and Rhonda, and then back at May. Her voice trembled as she said, I think that sounds good. I need some good news right now. New friends. Thank you for being here for me. Thank you for helping me. Her voice trailed off, and May leaned forward and patted Brooklyn on the palm. It won't be easy, but you're not alone now, girl. Rhonda, it's time to help this lady get herself together. Before you go, May stood up, went to the kitchen, and returned with a bottle of Wallersheim Prairie Fume wine. Here, I thought you might need a bottle or two tonight. It's on me. It's a good wine, this Prairie Fume. 2 gold medals, you know. Who would have thought they made such excellent wine in Wisconsin? She handed the bottle to Rhonda, who nodded gratefully to May, and the other 3 women stood up. Thanks, May, Rhonda said. Same time next Friday? I will, May replied, as they reached the front door and all the women put on their protective clothing, ready to face the cold weather. Saying goodbye and hugging them quickly before leaving, May closed the door and paused in the hallway for a few moments, looking back. Silly old woman, she chided herself. He's dead and gone, and he'll never come back. But then she raised her head and said timidly, But I wish it weren't so. I love you, Randall. I never will. Then she frowned and went to clear the coffee from the living room. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for new videos.